The afternoon sun spilled warmly over the marble floors of the Los Angeles Ridge Mall, a sprawling place filled with life, laughter, chatter, and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the air. Among the crowd walked a man most people wouldn't look twice at. A tall figure in faded jeans, a plain black hoodie and a worn baseball cap pulled low. His name was Keanu Reeves. He wasn't there for fame, cameras, or promotion. He had come quietly, just to stroll through the mall he'd secretly helped build. Years ago, when the mall faced bankruptcy, Keanu had invested silently, never attaching his name, never seeking credit. Today, he simply wanted to see how things were going. He bought a cup of coffee from a small kiosk, nodded to the barista with his gentle smile, and leaned against a pillar near the fountain, watching families laugh, teenagers joke, and old couples walk hand in hand. For a few minutes, it felt peaceful, but then peace broke. A security guard, broad-shouldered and strict-faced, walked briskly toward him. His badge read Rick. The guard's eyes narrowed as he scanned Keanu's simple outfit. To him, this man didn't look like someone who belonged there. No designer clothes, no fancy bag, no sign of wealth. Just an ordinary guy standing near the entrance with a coffee. Rick approached with authority. "Excuse me, sir," he said firmly. "You can't stand here doing nothing. If you're not shopping, I'll have to ask you to move along." Keanu blinked, slightly caught off guard, but remained calm. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just taking a short break," he replied softly. "It's a nice place." "I like the atmosphere," Rick frowned. "Nice place, huh? Then maybe buy something instead of hanging around. We've had complaints about loitering." A few heads turned nearby. Shoppers slowed down, curious. Keanu smiled politely. "Of course. No problem." But as he took a sip of his coffee, Rick's tone hardened. "You need to move now, sir." Keanu hesitated, not because he was defying authority, but because he didn't understand the hostility. Still, he nodded. "All right, I'll go." The guard stepped closer, his hand brushing his belt radio. "Next time, don't wander around. We keep this area clean of suspicious folks." Those last words hit hard, not because they were loud, but because they carried judgment. A young boy nearby whispered to his mom, "He looks like John Wick." The mom chuckled nervously, not believing it could actually be him. Keanu turned toward the exit, keeping his calm, but his quiet dignity made everyone watching feel something shift in the air. And that's when it happened. Rick reached out, blocking his path. "Hold on," he said sharply. "Show me your ID." The crowd fell silent. Keanu looked at the guard, his expression unreadable, neither angry nor afraid. What Keanu did next left everyone in the mall speechless. The mall had grown unusually quiet. The soft hum of conversations faded as Rick, the security guard, stood face to face with Keanu Reeves. Demanding identification, Keanu reached calmly into his pocket, his movements slow and respectful. The last thing he wanted was to appear threatening. He pulled out his wallet and handed over his ID without a word. Rick snatched it, barely glancing at it before scoffing. "Keanu Reeves, really?" He let out a short laugh. "Nice fake name, buddy. You think that's funny?" A few people nearby exchanged looks of disbelief. A woman whispered, "Wait, that is Keanu Reeves." Another man frowned. "Is this for real? Why's the guard talking to him like that?" Keanu remained composed. "That's my real name, sir." Rick shook his head, unimpressed. "Sure it is. And I'm Bruce Wayne. Listen, I don't have time for jokes. Just step outside before I have to escort you." Keanu's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just came to get coffee." Rick's patience was wearing thin. "Yeah, well, next time pick a better spot. You're blocking traffic." By now, several shoppers had their phones out recording. The tension was magnetic, a storm about to break. Keanu didn't flinch. His years of dealing with paparazzi, reporters, and even rude strangers had taught him something most people never learn. Dignity is power. He took a breath. "All right," he said quietly, turning toward the exit once more. But as he moved, a second guard approached, a younger one, smirking. "What's going on here, Rick?" "Caught this guy hanging around," Rick said loudly. "Claims he's Keanu Reeves." The second guard chuckled. "Right. Next he'll say he owns the mall." That comment made Keanu pause for a brief moment. His eyes flickered with a quiet amusement. Not anger, just irony. If only they knew. He gave a small smile, nodded slightly, and started walking away again. But the crowd had begun to grow, murmuring and whispering. Someone in the back said, "No way, that's definitely him. Look at his face." Another voice. "Why are they treating him like that? He's one of the kindest celebrities out there." Rick turned toward them defensively. "Mind your own business, people. I'm just doing my job." The tone was sharp enough to echo. Keanu stopped at the glass doors, coffee cup still in hand. His reflection stared back at him. Calm, humble, but quietly disappointed. Behind him, Jinky, his longtime assistant who'd been walking from another store, appeared at the corner of the hallway. She saw the small crowd and recognized the familiar silhouette. Her expression changed instantly. "Mr. Reeves?" she called out softly, stepping closer. Rick glanced back, annoyed. "You know this guy?" "Yes," she replied firmly. "He's—" Keanu raised his hand slightly, stopping her. His eyes told her not to reveal anything. Rick misread the gesture completely. "Don't tell her to stop. You think you can just wave people off?" The crowd's murmurs grew louder. A few were now clearly filming, knowing something big was unfolding. Keanu turned back to Rick, voice low but steady. "You've made your point. I'll leave peacefully." Rick crossed his arms. "Isha, you'd better." For a moment, silence hung thick in the air. Keanu walked slowly toward the exit, head slightly bowed, not in shame, but in restraint. He could have embarrassed the man in a second. He could have pulled rank, called the management, or simply said, "I own this place," but instead he chose patience. As the doors opened and he stepped into the light, a woman's voice from the crowd broke the silence. Why would anyone treat Keanu Reeves like that? Rick froze mid-step. He turned sharply, but it was too late. The truth was beginning to spread. The sound of sliding glass doors echoed faintly as Keanu Reeves stepped outside into the afternoon breeze. The coffee cup in his hand had gone cold, but he didn't seem to care. For him, it wasn't about the drink anymore. It was about something much heavier. Behind him, Rick the security guard followed briskly, his boots tapping sharply on the marble floor. The second guard trailed along, chuckling under his breath. "Unbelievable," Rick muttered. "Some people really think they can walk around anywhere they please." Keanu turned slightly, his calm voice cutting through the noise. "I didn't mean to cause you any trouble," Rick scoffed. "Trouble? You're lucky I didn't call the cops. You think you can just loiter around a private property?" By now the commotion had drawn even more attention. Shoppers peered through the glass doors, phones still recording. The tension had turned the mall entrance into a silent stage. The younger guard laughed again. "Man, you really do look like that movie guy, though." What was his name? John something? A ripple of laughter came from a few onlookers. Rick smirked, feeling a surge of authority. "Yeah, right. Maybe he thinks he's John Wick, here to save the day with his imaginary gun." That line got a few nervous laughs, but others in the crowd weren't amused. A woman frowned and whispered to her son, "That is Keanu Reeves. Why are they talking to him like that?" Keanu's eyes softened at the sight of the child, a small boy holding a toy car, watching with confusion. It reminded him of countless moments he'd spent with kids at charity events, the innocence of those who still saw goodness in the world. He turned back to Rick. "I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression," he said gently. "But there's really no need for this." Rick stepped forward, his tone sharper. "Oh, there's a need. People like you think you can wander in here, stand around, and make this place look bad. This mall has a reputation to protect." The irony of that statement would later make headlines across the world. Keanu's calm composure only seemed to fuel Rick's frustration. "You think I don't know your type? You come in, act polite, but you're just looking for trouble, or a free ride." Keanu took a slow breath. "I assure you that's not who I am." Rick's voice rose. "Then who are you?" That question hung in the air like a challenge. The crowd fell silent. For a second, Keanu almost answered, almost told the truth, but he didn't. Instead, he said softly, "I'm just someone who believes in treating people kindly, even when they don't do the same." Rick rolled his eyes. "Save the quotes for a movie, man." The younger guard laughed again, but the laughter was hollow now. Even he could feel that something about this was off. The energy around them had changed. The audience wasn't with the guards anymore. From behind the crowd, someone shouted, "That's really him. Look at his face." Another voice added, "Yeah, and he's still being polite while they're disrespecting him." The guards looked around nervously. Phones were raised, dozens of them. The once smug look on Rick's face started to falter. But instead of stopping, he doubled down. All right, that's enough. Rick snapped, stepping closer. I'm taking you to the office. We'll sort this out inside. Keanu's brow furrowed slightly. You want to take me to the office? Yeah, Rick barked. You think this is funny?
Let's go.
The air thickened. Jinky, Keanu's assistant, tried to intervene. Sir, please, Rick pointed at her sharply. You stay out of this, ma'am. This doesn't concern you, it was too much. Even the crowd began to murmur in disbelief. One man muttered, He's crossing a line now. Keanu looked at the trembling child nearby, the same boy with the toy car, and saw the fear in his eyes. That was the moment it stopped being about pride. It became about principle. He stood straighter, his calm turning into quiet strength. You don't need to touch me, he said evenly. You've said enough. The weight of his voice stopped Rick mid-step. For the first time, the guard hesitated, sensing that this wasn't just any man he was dealing with. The tension could be cut with a knife. Cameras zoomed in, recording every breath, every look, and then came the question that silenced everyone watching. If you were standing there as a bystander, would you step in? Or stay quiet? For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Keanu Reeves stood still, calm, steady, his presence quiet yet powerful. The crowd surrounding the scene had grown to dozens now, maybe more. Some people were whispering, some were holding their phones up high, and others just stood frozen trying to piece together what they were witnessing. Rick, the security guard, was still trying to assert control, his face flushed with pride and frustration. He had no idea who he was dealing with, but the crowd was beginning to. A teenager wearing a hoodie stepped forward from the edge of the group. His phone screen glowed as he zoomed in on Keanu's face. His eyes widened in disbelief. Wait a second, he muttered. That's Keanu Reeves. A woman beside him gasped. What? No way. The teen turned his phone around, showing a photo from Google. The resemblance was undeniable. The same gentle eyes, the same worn expression, the same quiet posture. Within seconds, the whisper became a wave. That's him. It really is Keanu Reeves. Oh my God, that's John Wick. Rick turned, hearing the growing commotion. What are you all mumbling about? He snapped, but by then it was too late. The energy in the air had completely changed. Keanu said nothing. He didn't correct anyone, didn't confirm, didn't deny. He just stood there, holding his now empty coffee cup, watching the situation unfold with quiet grace. The second guard frowned, glancing between the crowd and Keanu. Rick. Maybe we should check, Rick interrupted sharply. No, don't tell me you believe that nonsense. Look at him. You think a millionaire movie star dresses like that? The crowd murmured louder. Some laughed softly. Others looked disgusted by the guard's arrogance. A young mother shook her head. Unbelievable, even when the truth's in front of him. Keanu's assistant Jinky stepped closer again, trying to end it peacefully. Sir, please, she said to Rick, her voice calm but firm. This man doesn't deserve this treatment. Rick shot her a glare. Oh, so now you're defending him. What, you his manager or something? Jinky took a small breath. Something like that. Rick waved her off. Enough. If he doesn't leave right now, I'm calling the police. A hush swept over the crowd. The absurdity of it all was sinking in. The man standing before them, one of Hollywood's most beloved and humble stars, was being threatened by his own employee. The teenager who had recognized Keanu stepped forward bravely. Hey man, you really don't know who that is, he said to Rick. That's literally Keanu Reeves. He's like the nicest guy ever. Rick scoffed. Kid, don't get involved. But others joined in. He's right. Everyone knows him. Dude, how could you not recognize him? Rick's authority was crumbling fast. His posture stiffened as he realized he was losing control, not just of the situation, but of the crowd. Keanu finally spoke, his voice soft, but firm enough to be heard by all. It's all right, he said. Please, don't make this worse. That calmness and that humility was disarming, the kind that made even his critics pause. The mall had gone silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning and the clicking of phone cameras. Every eye was now on Keanu. A middle-aged man near the fountain stepped forward. Sir, he said politely to Rick, if that really is Keanu Reeves, and I think it is, you might want to stop talking before this goes viral. Rick blinked. Viral? The man nodded. Oh, it's already happening. He pointed to the dozens of phones recording live. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Streams were going out in real time and comments were flooding in. Is that really Keanu? What's happening? Why's the guard yelling at him? Rick's confidence faltered. He looked back at Keanu, searching his face for any sign, any clue that might prove this was all some mistake. But Keanu's calm eyes didn't help. They weren't angry. They were kind. That kindness unsettled him more than any shouting could have. Rick muttered under his breath, "If this is a prank, you're all in trouble." Then came a voice from behind the crowd, firm, professional, and commanding. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned. A woman in a suit, the mall's operations manager, and was walking quickly toward them, her heels clicking on the floor. Her eyes widened the moment she saw who was standing at the center of the crowd. She froze mid-step. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mr. Reeves." The words hung in the air like a spark in dry grass. The entire crowd gasped. Rick's face went pale. Jinky exhaled in relief. Keanu simply nodded with his quiet, gentle smile. Rick stammered, "Mr. Reeves? Wait, the Keanu Reeves?" The manager's voice was trembling now. "Yes, Rick. The owner." The guard's radio slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a sharp clack, and for the first time since it all began, the mall was completely silent. The crowd stood frozen. The echo of the mall manager's words, "Yes, Rick, the owner," still lingered in the air like a thunderclap. Rick's face went completely pale. His jaw hung open as he struggled to find words that wouldn't come. I didn't know," he stammered. Keanu looked at him for a long, quiet moment, not with anger, but with something deeper. Disappointment. The mall manager rushed forward, nearly tripping over herself. "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry about this," she said breathlessly. "He didn't know who you were." Keanu raised a hand, gently stopping her. "Please," he said softly. "It's all right." He turned to Rick, who was trembling now, his earlier arrogance replaced with visible regret. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for the actor's reaction. The man they'd seen take down armies on screen, now standing face to face with someone who had just humiliated him. But Keanu didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't use his power or position to crush the man in front of him. Instead, he spoke in that calm, grounded voice that carried more weight than any raised tone ever could. "You know," he began, "it's easy to treat people well when you know who they are. But real respect, real kindness, is how you treat someone when you don't." Rick swallowed hard, eyes dropping to the floor. "You looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong," Keanu continued. "And maybe that's what we've all forgotten. How quick we are to judge by appearances, by clothes, by assumptions. We forget that every person standing in front of us has a story, a name, a worth." The crowd was completely silent. Even the sound of the fountain nearby seemed to fade. "You asked who I was," Keanu said, his voice steady. "I'm no different from anyone here. I get tired, I take walks, I stop for coffee. I believe in decency. And I believe that titles don't make us better. Actions do." Rick looked up slowly, his eyes glistening. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean to." Keanu nodded gently. "I know you were doing your job. But maybe next time, look a little deeper before you decide who someone is." Those words hit harder than any punishment could. The crowd broke into soft applause, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Even the mall staff joined in, their eyes filled with respect. Jinky smiled faintly, relief and pride in her expression. The teenager who had first recognized Keanu wiped his eyes, whispering, "That's why he's the best." Keanu gave one last humble nod to the crowd, then turned back to Rick. "Don't be ashamed," he said quietly. "Be better." And with that, he walked away, slow, calm, and dignified, leaving behind a silence that no one would forget. The clapping still echoed faintly through the marble halls of the mall as Keanu Reeves began to walk away. His quiet words, "Be better," hung in the air almost like a prayer. But the scene wasn't over yet. A few moments later, the sound of quick footsteps approached. A second security officer, older, composed, with silver streaks in his hair, arrived on the scene, responding to Rick's earlier call for backup. He glanced at the crowd, at the phone still recording, and finally at Rick, who stood stiff and pale. "What's going on here?" he asked. Rick tried to speak, but his throat seemed dry. "It was, a misunderstanding." Before the older officer could respond, his eyes landed on Keanu, who had turned slightly, acknowledging his presence with a small nod. The officer froze. His eyes widened. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Mr. Reeves." Rick looked at him sharply. "Wait, you know him too?" The older officer's voice softened, almost reverent. "Of course I do. Everyone knows him. Sir, I had no idea you were here." He turned toward the stunned crowd, then back to Keanu. "Please forgive this incident. If I had known—" Keanu stopped him gently. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "You didn't do anything wrong." The older officer nodded respectfully, understanding instantly that Keanu wasn't just being polite. He was leading by example. Rick, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to disappear. His cap was now in his hands, his head bowed, eyes fixed on the floor. Every ounce of pride that had once fueled his arrogance had dissolved into shame. The mall manager stepped forward again, trying to handle the situation professionally. "Mr. Reeves," she began carefully, "we're deeply sorry. This will never happen again. I'll see to it personally." Keanu looked around, at the crowd, the guards, the manager, his expression calm, thoughtful. "You don't have to make it about punishment," he said quietly. "What happened here today? It's bigger than one person's mistake." The manager frowned, unsure how to respond. "Bigger, sir?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, because all of this, happens every day to people who don't have cameras recording. To people who don't get recognized." The crowd went still. Keanu turned slightly toward Rick, who was still standing a few steps back, looking utterly broken. "When we judge someone by their clothes or their silence or how they look, we take away their dignity. And once you take that from someone, you take a piece of your own humanity too." Even the air felt heavier now. It wasn't anger that filled the space, and it was realization. Rick's lips trembled. "Sir, I didn't mean to disrespect you." Keanu shook his head. "It's not about me. You could have treated anyone that way. That's what matters." He placed his coffee cup gently on a nearby trash bin, his every movement measured and composed. "I've been poor," he continued softly. "I've been ignored and I've been adored. None of it really changes who I am. The only thing that matters is how we treat each other, especially when no one's watching." The crowd broke into murmurs of agreement. Phones kept recording, but for once it didn't feel like a spectacle. It felt like a sermon. Rick wiped a tear from his cheek, barely able to look up. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he muttered. Keanu smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't something we deserve. It's something we choose to give." Those words landed with quiet force. The older officer stepped forward and placed a hand on Rick's shoulder. "Learn from this, son," he said softly. "He's giving you a gift most people wouldn't." Keanu turned toward the manager one last time. "Please make sure your team gets proper empathy training," he said kindly. "I'll cover the cost." The manager blinked, shocked. You'll pay for it?" He nodded. "Of course. Because that's what this place was built for. Opportunity, not judgment." Then, with a small, humble smile, he said something that made the crowd gasp all over again. "You see, I never wanted to own this mall. I just wanted to help save it when people needed jobs. The rest, the profit, the fame, that's never been mine to keep. It belongs to everyone who believes in fairness." The applause this time was thunderous. People clapped, cheered, and some even teared up. The younger guard lowered his camera and whispered, "He's not just an actor. He's a lesson." Keanu nodded to the officers one last time. "Thank you for keeping this place safe," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Now let's make sure we're keeping people's dignity safe too." And with that, he turned and walked out through the glass doors, sunlight spilling over him like a spotlight. Not the staged kind, but the kind that only truth can create. Outside, people watched him go. A simple man in a hoodie and jeans, the owner who never needed to remind anyone who he was. Do you think the guard deserves to lose his badge after this incident? Or did Keanu's forgiveness teach him the greater lesson? Share your thoughts in the comments below. By the next morning, the incident had already exploded across the internet. A shaky cell phone video only 3 minutes long was everywhere, on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. The caption read, "Security guard kicks Keanu Reeves out of his own mall." His response left everyone speechless. Within hours, the clip had over 10 million views. By noon, it had tripled. Every news outlet from Los Angeles to Manila was talking about it. But it wasn't the confrontation that drew people in. It was what came after. The video showed Keanu, calm and kind, gently telling the guard, "When we judge someone by their clothes, we take away their dignity, and a piece of our own humanity too." Those words hit differently. They weren't just heard, but they were felt. The internet reacts comments flooded in beneath the viral clip. "That man has more class in silence than most have in a lifetime." "Keanu is proof that true power doesn't shout and it whispers." "I wish the world had more leaders like him." People began sharing their own stories. Times when they were misjudged, ignored or humiliated for how they looked. The story became bigger than them all. It became a mirror for society. Soon, major news channels picked it up. CNN ran the headline, "Keanu Reeves teaches a masterclass in humility after being mistaken for a homeless man." Social media exploded with hashtags, "Be better, respect all," Keanu challenge. Schools played the video in classrooms. Companies used it in ethics workshops. Even celebrities commented, praising the way Keanu handled everything with patience instead of pride. The guard's reflection. Meanwhile, back at the mall, the young security guard, Rick, sat quietly in the employee lounge, his face buried in his hands. The mall manager had suspended him temporarily pending review. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What broke him was seeing himself in that viral video. The arrogance, the tone, the blind judgment. He could hardly recognize the man in uniform who had barked at Keanu like he was trash. For hours, he replayed that moment when Keanu said, "It's not about me." You could have treated anyone that way. Those words haunted him, not because they shamed him, but because they revealed a truth he'd been avoiding for years. He wasn't a bad person. He was just disconnected, trapped in the small bubble of authority that his badge gave him. He'd forgotten what that badge truly meant, to protect, not to profile. That evening, he sat down and wrote a long email to Keanu's foundation. Not for forgiveness, but for guidance. He wrote, "You reminded me what real strength looks like. I want to become the kind of man who treats everyone with respect, not because they deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do." Keanu's response 2 days later, Keanu replied, personally. He thanked Rick for having the courage to reach out and invited him to join a community outreach event his foundation was hosting. The event was called Humanity First. There, Rick met volunteers, students, and veterans, people from all walks of life. And among them stood Keanu, in the same plain black hoodie and jeans, pouring coffee for guests like an ordinary man. When Rick approached him nervously, Keanu smiled warmly. "Glad you made it," he said. "You took the first step most people never do. You looked inward." Rick could barely speak. "I'll never forget what you said that day." Keanu patted him on the shoulder. "Neither will I," he replied, "because it reminded me that kindness only matters if we keep choosing it, even when it's hard." The public message that weekend, Keanu finally released an official statement through his Instagram. "We live in a world quick to judge and slow to listen. But dignity is not a luxury. It's a birthright. Every person you meet carries a story you know nothing about. Respect costs nothing, but it can change everything." His post crossed 50 million likes in 24 hours. Global news anchors quoted it. Influencers stitched it into their videos. Even schools added it to their moral science syllabi. And quietly, without making any grand announcements, Keanu donated funds to create a new employee training program across his business ventures, focused on empathy, equality, and emotional intelligence. Its new name? Be Better. The legacy weeks later, the same mall hosted a charity event. Rick was there again, not as a guard, but as a volunteer. He stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a smile and offering free coffee. No arrogance, no judgment, just humility. When Keanu walked in, the two shared a simple nod, one of mutual respect and silent understanding. A journalist nearby caught that moment and wrote, "In a world full of noise, Keanu Reeves leads with silence, and it speaks louder than any headline ever could." As the evening ended, Keanu addressed the crowd. "This story isn't about a mall or a mistake. It's about us, remembering that respect is the one currency that never loses its value. He looked into the audience, his voice calm yet commanding. If you believe in equality, kindness, and respect, don't just type it, live it. The crowd rose to their feet in applause, and just like that, the man who had been kicked out of his own mall became a symbol of everything the world needed to remember. If you believe in respect and equality, type respect in the comments, and share this story to remind the world that kindness still wins.